Hey, this is Sherry from Sherry's Cabin. Happy New Year! We're iced in here in West Texas, which is really odd, but it makes it the perfect day to begin my new video tutorials for my blog. I have learned so much from other people who've been willing to share on video tutorials online. This is my way of paying it forward. In keeping with my challenges that I post on my blog, we'll be creating simple art projects that we can pass on to others to make someone smile. And of course, art on a budget. So let's get started. Let's create some art and get out there and step out for God and bless somebody. All right, let's gather up some supplies. I'm working on my setup for these new tutorial videos, so you get to be my guinea pig today. We will need some paper clay. I use the Creative Paper Clay. Notice it's $9.99 at Hobby Lobby, but of course we have the 40% off coupon. Be sure and use that when you go. And I have a variety of tools. Chopsticks, toothpicks, anything will work. We will need some masking tape, some foil, something to cover your surface with, and I usually have some paintbrushes on hand to smooth clay and some water. So let's get that gathered up. So here we have a photo of some of the little candy hearts that we're going to be creating today. Ours won't look exactly like these, but it will give us something to go on. And so let me lay that over here. You can see that I've drawn a heart shape here in the middle, probably just to keep me under the camera for you, but so that we have some sort of guideline to go with. Now that doesn't mean my ornament's going to fit this exactly, but as I shape it, I have something to work with. So let's get a sheet of foil. You can see here I pulled out about a foot of the heavy-duty long foil. So, going to make some noise here, crumple this up, and start trying to make a heart shape. Doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be extremely tight, and I can always add more foil to it. And you can see here, sort of getting the shape. So mash a little bit more here. I know that the candies are rounded at the bottom, so I don't want my heart to be too pointed at the end. And I'm noticing that I don't have an indentation there, and because I have arthritis in my hands, I'm going to grab a tool here and kind of mash that in. This just happens to be some pack of tools I bought at the junk bin at the hardware store, but it does have a nice little flat edge there. Pencil will work, knife will work, anything. Make my dent there. And I see that my heart is lopsided. Easy fix. I'm going to grab another piece of foil and add to it. So it looks like this side here needs a little bit more foil, needs to be a little bit thicker for what I'm wanting it to look like. That's looking pretty good. And so I just start tearing off here. Want to fill in that little gap. Don't worry about the foil having leftovers, because you can always use it for the next project. It makes great fillers for little holes and indentions if you have a spot that you want to fill in. I try to get it filled in where there are not huge gaps and holes so that I don't use a lot of excess clay. One reason it dries better when you don't get too thick with the clay, and of course we're on a budget. So this side's looking pretty good. I notice this side is still pretty lumpy, and so I just flatten that out. I can actually put it down on the table and mash flat. And And now I have the armature for a heart. And I didn't really talk about armatures to begin with, but when I sculpt, I do put something inside for the reasons I've already told you. And it's especially important when we make larger sculpts, which we are going to be doing this year, so that the clay dries properly inside. Okay, so there we have our armature for our heart. Let's move this out of the way. And we are going to take some masking tape. And for paper clay, it's different when we use polymer, but for paper clay, I will wrap the foil in masking tape. It seems to me to have a little bit more grab when I start applying the paper clay, and it holds my foil in place. And so normally I don't like tutorials that skip a portion, but I think that all of you can wrap tape around foil, so I'm going to stop the video here and finish wrapping. Here we are back with a masking tape wrapped heart, and I have made two. You can see that this one is a little bit different shaped. This one looks to me more like the candy that we're after, but this one will work. So no heart has to be perfect. These are going to be perfect hearts when we spread a special message with them. So let's get some paper clay. I have a package already opened. Notice I've got it in a plastic Ziploc bag, and I keep it in there all the time because it dries out very quickly. If you haven't worked with paper clay before, you can add water back to it, but it never seems to get that same texture after it has started to dry out. And so this one, I have used quite a bit of it, and it has started to dry somewhat, but that will be okay for my base layer. We will end up opening the new package, so you'll get a chance to see that. But I'm going to take a pretty good chunk of clay, and I'm going to flatten it out. I'll have to remind myself to stay in camera here. I'm going to use some water, use it a lot. In fact, probably my favorite sculpting tools are on the ends of my hands. You'll find that you use your fingers more than anything. And so I'm going to smooth it out. It doesn't have to be pretty on the edges, but I want to thin it to probably a little less than 1/4 of an inch. I don't know, I don't measure it. So that it's not too paper thin, but that we can start to wrap it around the heart. We can always add more. And so I just mash down what I've got so far. Not worried about pretty right now. I want to get the whole surface covered, and notice we will start to get cracks immediately. Add some more water, mash it together, and smooths right out. Okay, so we want to avoid getting gaps underneath. As we start to sculpt, we don't want a pocket like this underneath where it's gapped open. We want to smooth it and lay it as flat as we can, so that as we sculpt, we don't have air bubbles in there that mess us up later on down the line. So let me grab some more clay here. And this truly is starting to dry, so I'm going to dip again and knead it a little bit to get that water worked into it. And pinch that out. Add that to the bottom. Now notice I'm going to join the two pieces together just by pinching. And no matter what we're working with in the paper clay, whatever we happen to be sculpting, this same method works. You can just pinch the two together, use your thumb to smooth it over, and get your base covered. If you find that you have a little bit too much clay in an area that it seems really thick, you can just mash it and move it on around to a thinner area. And as I smooth here, I will talk to you a little bit about the challenges on my blog and what my plans are for the year. I love to create. I love to make art of all kinds. And sometimes it seems a little bit selfish to me because I get such enjoyment out of it. God has blessed me with creativity, and I give all of the glory to Him for it, but it seems almost like I am getting to play and enjoy myself when I should be doing something more. And so I got to thinking about how art makes people smile and how we could use that to bless other people that we meet. Our friends, our family, and even total strangers. And so I set out last year to do some challenges to challenge people who visit my blog to create something that they could use to get out and let folks know that God cares about them and that we are His messenger. So this year, I wanted to do tutorials all last year and never got around to it. I started several, never got them finished, never posted them. And so what a way to start the new year with these tutorials. And this one is going to get finished. And so this year, my plan is to have Tuesday tutorials, and I'm hoping to do a video each week of some sort. Not making any promises, but that's my plan, so that we can create little things that don't take a great deal of our time that we can bless other people with. I think these hearts would make cute ornaments to send with a little message. And enough said. You wouldn't have to say a great deal of things, just a little note. Wanted to bless your day. Ba-bam, that's it. Okay, and you see I am still adding clay and mashing around here as I am just rambling on. This process takes a little while because you want to get an even layer all the way around. And you notice we have lots of bumps right now. We're going to be working on smoothing those out. I believe in smoothing from the get-go when you can to get your surfaces like you want them. And it saves a great deal of work later on when you go to add details. Not so much in this heart, but if we were to be sculpting a face of some sort, we would want to keep smoothing as we go so that we're not fighting it at the end. And I think I've moved out of camera again, sorry. And it looks like I'm going to be just a little shy on clay right here. So I'm going to have to stop the camera for just a minute so that I can get the new bag and open it up. And put right on that corner. If you leave your clay sitting for any length of time, you will feel it start to dry out, and you can just dip your fingers in and add some more water to it. If you're going to leave it and not work on it for a while, you need to put it in a plastic Ziploc bag and put it in the bottom drawer of the refrigerator so that it keeps that pliability. So if you have dimples, you can add more clay or work your palms to smooth them out, which is what I'm going to do here. Now we have our basic shape of our heart. I do want some flat surfaces, so I'm going to take and press it down just like we did with the foil. Notice I get a smooth surface until I stick my thumb in it. if you can feel the paper or the tape underneath, you have pushed so hard that you've smoothed out and you're too close to the tape, be sure that you add some more clay to that. You don't want to get down to the tape surface, which is what was happening there. Okay, I'm starting to see a piece of candy. I think I will smooth this edge one more time. And depending on how flat you want it, you could actually take and put excess clay around it and take a scalpel or a sharp knife and trim around it and make that edge very flat. But I don't think I want that look. I want it a little bit more rounded in this case. Now I'm going to, my hearts are going to be a little bit different. You can write whatever you choose on your hearts. I think I will create 3 to start with. And the first one is going to say faith. So I need to find something to write with, and this is trial and error in the making. So possibly even a pencil. I'm going to try one of these rounded wedge tips. If I don't like it, I'll smooth it out and start again. And I want that look of the candy. So I want some block letters, and I'm going to start with the F. And I'm going deep because we will be sanding these. And I don't want to sand off the letters. And I'm going to have to clean it several times as I cut into it because I'm picking up some of that clay. If you have a stamp that has a word you'd like, that would be perfect. But I don't, so I am going to do this the hard way. And hope that I spell everything correctly. Now if I have little bits of clay sticking up, that's not a problem. As we sand, those will break right off. I do want it, however, straight. I'm that teacher that cringes in the classroom when somebody writes something on the board for me and it's crooked. And this is likely going to be one of those things that makes me cringe because it's not centered. So we have a choice to make. And those of you that know me probably know what I will do. And that's probably going to be to wipe it off and start over. Although I kind of like that, maybe not. It would make me happier if it were centered. But for our first candy heart, I think that looks pretty good. So there we have it. Our first piece of Valentine candy. I know it's simple, but how neat would this be when we have it painted and we have it on a ribbon with a little note and pass on to someone that wasn't expecting anything. That's the great part, when it's someone who isn't expecting a gift from you. Could even be a total stranger. I know that gets a little weird sometimes, but you never know what you can pass on to brighten and bless somebody's day. We aren't going to put any kind of hook in it yet. We will let that dry and then drill a little hole, add some glue. So until it dries, we are done. We'll be back when we're ready to paint. Just kidding. I'm back with a few tips that I forgot to tell you. When you are letting these dry, in the summertime it's great just to sit them in front of a box fan and let the air blow across them. You can put them in the oven at a very low temperature, like 150, but it doesn't seem to speed up the process too much. The best thing is to just put them on some paper towels and sit them off somewhere where you forget about them for a couple of days, which drives me crazy. But that is one of the best things to do. I did go ahead and finish our other heart, and I wanted to give you a few more tips. Here's our faith, and then I did faith, hope, and love all on one heart. Some things that I thought of after the video is these little crumbs. Watch for these little crumbs on your paper and on your hands. After a while, they dry, and then they will drive you crazy when they get stuck in your clay. So clean your area quite frequently. Another thing the baby wipes are really good for. And for some correction ideas, I liked this heart, but I have this area here at the bottom that I really want to fix. As I was working on it, kind of mashed it in there, and it could stand maybe a little bit more right here to even it out. No problem. I'm going to let it dry completely. I'm going to sand the areas that I think I want to sand, and then I'm going to take and wet that with a paintbrush, and I'll actually show you when we get to that point. But I wanted to tell you now, in case you are thinking that you've made a mistake you can't fix, you can add clay once it's dry, and that's not a problem. So now, until they're dry, we will take a break. Here we are. We have some dried hearts, and we are ready to move on to our next step. We need to take a piece of sandpaper. This happens to be, let's see, 220 grit aluminum oxide sandpaper. When I'm doing faces and things, I will use even a 400 grit sandpaper. But for this is fine. You need to wear a dust mask, and then take it outdoors and sand. And so you just go over your surfaces and sand those edges. I already have done the sanding on this one that I want to do. I want to show you some repair techniques, which I did put in a little here on the bottom for this one. But on this particular heart, I have sanded it down, and I still see some places that I don't like. This being one of them here. There is a dent here. So what I'm going to do is wet this a little bit with my finger. I'm going to take a little dab of clay, mash it onto that wet spot, and feather it out. Now remember that this clay does shrink just a little bit. Not badly, but it does shrink, a little bit more water. So I would rather leave it a little bit raised than push it into the indentation too much. So smooth that out. And then we have a little bit more dry time to fill that dent. Any other places that you see that you want to fill, you certainly can. We need to take some gesso. Here I don't use the really expensive gesso on my paper clay. I just want something to give it a grip for my paint. And so I'll use that to put a base coat on. Get that opened up. Sorry, I should have done that before we started. And get a brush, and I am going to coat this in a coat of gesso. Alright, let's get these hearts done. I've had to change the angle of the camera, had a little bad lighting issue tonight, so I hope that we can still see these. We have gessoed both hearts. I have done one layer and sanded again. You can put a second and even a third layer depending on how silky smooth you want. I want a little bit of that roughness, like I said, to add some antiquing to it. So I have taken, I'm ready to start painting here, just some folk art pink paint. Added a little white to it because I did not have a pastel pink. I'm not kind of really a pastel person. So added that, made a little bit more Pepto pink, and just start brushing on. So 2 coats of paint. I did one coat, let it dry, put a second coat, and then super light sanding over the top of it just because I wanted to knock off some of the brush strokes. That isn't necessary, but they are looking like a piece of candy. Now I want to take a little bit of red paint, and we are going to put that right into those grooves. You can see I've got a small round brush, and I'm going to take a little bit of paint, put this down where I can get a hold of it, and drag it into the grooves. So let's do all of our letters. Our hearts have their letters. I have some eye screws here, and I have already taken and screwed one of these into the top by holding and turning. I have screwed it back out. I'm going to dip it in a little bit of glue. This is some wood glue. Regular Elmer's works as well. And then I'm going to screw it back in. Until it is tight and at the angle that I want it. There we have our hooks inside. Wipe off any excess glue that you get around the edges. Touch up any paint. Sometimes you'll get a little bit of chipping around this. You can touch it up with a little bit of your paint and let those dry. While those dry, we're going to talk about the sealer. I have Krylon flat, clear, non-yellowing sealer. Now, it doesn't have to be Krylon, but if you are not wanting a shiny piece of candy, you want to find the flat sealer. And our next step will be to take these out in a well-ventilated area and spray them with the sealer. We now have them sealed. They're dry. We have one here that is sealed and clear, and I have started antiquing this one to see if I like it. Now that you've got it sealed, you can put it on, take it off as you choose. So I've got some burnt umber paint, and it looks like it's ruined when I do this. I can put it on as heavy or as light, and I can take a wet paper towel and start to wipe it down. I can also take a dry paper towel and kind of buff that on and off. And it just takes some time to see how you want it to look. If you don't like any of it, you simply take your wet paper towel and wipe it off. So you can see I have gone fairly heavy on the antiquing. Got it in some of the indentions. Did a wash over the top. We have one that is clear, looks like a new piece of candy, and one that gives it a more of the primitive look with the antiquing, and that would be entirely up to you as to what you want it to look like. All we need now is some ribbons and someone to pass these on to. Here we have our completed hearts. I thank you for making it through to the end of the video tutorial, and I hope that this has given you some ideas of ways that you can get out and share God with others. Let's start a revolution. Let's create a kindness revolution and surprise the world.